John Reyes, and thanks for joining in on the Authority Marketing Blueprints. Sit back, relax, and grab your virtual seat, because in this episode and every other episode, I'll be interviewing and collaborating with another high-level marketing and copywriting expert. If you haven't yet, go ahead and get some help along the way as we dish out and pinpoint some of the most profitable, powerful marketing and copywriting wisdom. Get some help with implementing everything you'll hear in this episode and other episodes by downloading my personal sales funnel swipe file stash at copyblueprints.com. Now, grab your virtual seat and listen in. We have a certified copywriting veteran on board today. His name is Adil Amarsi. He's been in the, crushing it since maybe 2008 or so, 17 years as the time of this recording. Kind of branded himself as a dark horse, and kind of in the background did over 1.2 billion in client sales in over 428 markets, industries, and niches combined. He's worked, sold anything from vacuums to real estate to dating to timeshares, and he's had a really good run with some copywriting students as well. So thanks, Adil, for coming on.
Thanks, John. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Of course. So one thing you mentioned when we kind of broke the ice a few weeks ago, which is really cool to know, we actually have some old mentors of mine who are actually good friends of yours, and it's really interesting to find the overlap in our experiences. One thing you really mentioned, which is there's a lot of hearsay or different ideas and contradictory info floating around, is you mentioned copywriting as an anti-poverty skill.
Yeah.
10, 20, 30 years ago, everyone was on board. You can land in a new city with a pencil and a notebook with no money, with 1 month's rent in the bank, and then write your way to making, write your way through a pencil and paper to just revive, even if you're flat broke with rooming up with people. Now there's so many different theories about, where's copywriting going, but I think we're all interested to hear about how you view copywriting as an anti-poverty skill.
It is. It's just been watered down to shit over the last 10 years. By the way, you don't mind me swearing, do you? If you do, don't worry about it. We can actually I can bleep myself.
We can blur your mouth out so people can't tell,
fine.
and then bleep it. So
it's all good.
No, you're all good.
So essentially, over the last 10 years, copywriting has changed its meaning. So I'm in my 30s right now, but I've been doing this for such a long time that it actually feels like it's been most of my life. I mean, I started doing this when I was 12 and went pro at 18. So that's 17 years of doing this professionally, and a bunch of years prior just doing stuff with my dad. The reality is what I was taught coming up was quite simply a copywriter was a marketer and a salesperson mixed together as if they had a baby, to show you exactly how to do everything from how to get the product to the customer to how to close the sale on the back end and everything about the product in between. The problem is today, most copywriters don't know how to do any of that stuff. They don't know how to build funnels. They don't even understand what funnel copy is. They don't know how to basically create sequences in different unisons and seeing how they would all work in different markets, using the same product but different angles to sell the same thing. They don't look at those things. And I think that's the problem, because AI will replace them. Content writers, email writers, sales letter writers, all of them, you guys can be replaced, including me, if that's all I did. But if you bring more to the table, like sitting down with a client and telling them the insights they're not able to see, for instance, where their product sales failing, why aren't they talking about a specific story and an angle that they don't even know about? Think about it this way. When was the last time ChatGPT and a client sat down together, went through it line by line about his life story, about why he does what he does or they do what they do, and it came up with some ridiculous angle that was entirely rooted in their core story that they've never shared before? I'll chalk it up. Never. It's never happened. I don't think it would ever happen, because ChatGPT is inanimate. It only understands logic. It doesn't understand emotion. So that being all established in what it is, the reason why I say copywriting is an anti-poverty skill is because it is. It doesn't matter what happens tomorrow. We can have a full-on EMP tomorrow from the sun, which we've been waiting for ages, and that right there could actually wipe out all technology tomorrow. Guess what? You still are able to write ads. You're still able to actually go ahead and leverage yourself. You can go find a business tomorrow that is failing, or a business that is a mom and pop shop that's just selling everyday grocery stuff, like just groceries, everyday stuff, like a bodega or whatever. You can go down to them, work with them, find out how to sell more of their products off the shelves faster than they can, and you take a small commission from it. That's another way of doing it. Essentially, copywriting is being able to leverage the skill of salesmanship to a higher level without actually having to overexert yourself. And if you can do that, you are actually anti-broke. You're anti-poor at that point because you can't become poor. You can go broke, but you can't be poor because you'll always find a way out. You'll always be able to find someone with a product. You'll always understand how to get someone to say yes. And the beauty of the skill of copywriting is it's transferable. And Gary Halbert used to say this all the time, as did Jay Abraham, as did Dan Kennedy, and every great person I've ever looked up to said, if the best copywriters in the world were former door-to-door salespeople, reason being they know how to sell. So if you run out of money, guess what you can go do? You can go get a job knocking doors on the phone, going to like events, doing whatever you can to sell because you now have a leverage system. If you understand the structure of a sales letter, you can actually structure an entire a presentation to an audience, to a webinar. You can be the crazy person on the street that's saying this entire incredibly crazy, fun, um, and unique way of what was it? Positioning whatever it is that you're trying to sell, whether it's help me find a place to stay tonight, help me be fed, let me help you with your business, look at how weird this is and give you some level of entertainment so you can part with your cash. Anything. You can do a myriad of different things, but this skill will allow you to market it. And again, the other thing as well is let's say you're no longer a copywriter tomorrow. Let's say you go into a completely blue ocean market, like out of 5, 10 years ago, this would have been a complete blue ocean. Today, it's far more of it's a little bit more of a, it's getting red, and that is the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu niche. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu niche 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, was on fire. Like it wasn't existent 10 years ago, and then 5 years ago, it just kind of exploded, went through the roof. Everything was kind of going the way it was, and then COVID made it actually better because a lot of people had stay-at-home trainings. And you have all this stuff there. And essentially, if you look at it, if Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was your skill, and not even your skill, your passion, and your skill was copywriting, you could actually get a black belt to film, or a brown belt to film, or a purple belt to film, and you could write all the ad copy and split the profits for them. If you have a, like, John, give me any business whatsoever. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, whatever niche or industry it is.
How about survival, selling cool gadgets?
Wonderful. Guess what? You can actually, I was homeless at one point. So while I was out, I understood a really cool survival trick on how to essentially keep people from stealing my stuff and essentially get heat when it was really, really cold, and how to do so using just everything you can find, not just at home, but just in a trash can that anyone can find anywhere all across America. Um, and then what you do is you find a survival company. If you had a survival knife, whatever it is, find the survival company that produces that knife, write an ad for them based on your experience if you did have that experience, and go from there. If not, find someone, talk to them, get their story, and you can run with it. But the reality is, you're forever able to actually walk away with money in your bank. One of the ones that we had for survival, surprisingly, is the story. Around COVID, we actually got one of my clients to buy a liberal list. He was a conservative. We wrote the ad for the liberal market. It was a very small, it was very, very small list. We did about $260,000 over the course of the 12 months in 2020, 2021. Because the main message was like, do not let the government divide you on the way that we're dealing with this. I may not like your views as a liberal, but as a conservative, it's my duty to protect fellow Americans like yourself, even if we don't see eye to eye. Here's what I have for you, the ultimate survival guide through COVID, and it just gave them, survival tips. So you can do this practically everywhere, as long as you just know, you're speaking to people. Not that answers
Right.
the question.
Yeah, there's going to be like the evolution of industries, the evolution of the application of AI. I mean,
Yeah,
for example, there was bringing up Dan Kennedy, there's just sound like an old man, but the stuff he taught 20, 30, I don't know, maybe 40
40,
years
50
ago
years.
is still relevant. It's just, before was you buy from Dan Kennedy and people would create shrines because he would ship boxes of
Yeah.
DVDs, he would ship boxes of swipe files that were all printed out, books, and then people were just, they wouldn't even open the boxes. He said they would just get this physical gratification for paying, a few hundred to 1, 2 grand a month for a subscription, and they get all this stuff and they're just barely skimming through it. And then it was that psychology of I just paid for it, and am gratified. But then there's the application of, that psychology transfers to today because now people are doing masterminds, they're doing the digital info. People are still buying and consuming our info, but the way the buyer psychology transfers to that is a little
It,
different. But yeah, the anti-poverty skill is the crazy part is the principles of applying copy are still the same, 20, 30, 40 years later, which is something
they'll
that,
still, dude,
yep.
they'll be the same in 100, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 years from now. We'll be the same. We're human. The only thing that's changed for us in the last 5 or 10 years, and sorry to cut you off, but this is like a key thing that you touched on. The only thing that's changed for us is we care more about who the person is than we did before. That's the only difference. People nowadays care more about who you are more than just what you can do for them.
Right. It's like it is the application is AI. There's that question of where is it taking us? Do clients do they want to use AI? Do they rather just replace a 50-person team? Do copywriters can we build our own using AI? And it's yes to all of the above, but what's wise? In my opinion, copywriters can man if a client wants to create a 10-person AI team, one or two really good copywriters who have the skills of a copy chief can take that AI and replicate a 10-person team for you and then man it. There's
Yep.
business owners who want to spend hours and thousands of dollars learning about AI and then hiring and playing with AI and just like I want to cut back on a budget. And guys like you and I who are very well versed, I can tell if someone's banging out AI because I see different emojis in their posts. And then they use little things like dashes in the middle of sentences. And I'm like, at some point, it's highly trained writers and marketers can start to detect it, and it's like this is
Yeah.
becoming very watered down. But then there's that anti-poverty skill where it's guys like us, for example, it's some freelancers are like, oh shoot, either they're getting not paid as well or clients are viewing them as a dime a dozen. They're competing on price. But then there's that anti-poverty skill like you were talking about where it's like let's just get AI to sell our own books. I'm doing it now. I had 3 back-to-back launches. I created Facebook ads and I tested maybe 5. One of them was converting at 4 to 5% to cold traffic on just the clicks alone. Then I had my
Nice.
upsells converting over 50%, and I just had AI just generate, 10, 15 bullets. And then I put it away for a few days, and then I just turned them into headlines and big ideas and just kept playing with that little different leads. And then
Yeah.
there's the anti-poverty skill, like, we were just talking about of even if that happens, if we have these skills, it's like, okay, let's
Oh,
just
yeah.
go we could just go make AI work for us or delegate it to other people. But what really comes down to it is that foundational understanding, because we could
Yeah.
play around and slap around with AI all day. But if you have someone who can just be like, it doesn't have, like you mentioned, the emotion, it doesn't have that human
Connection.
intuition, yep, to do the research and create a big idea because you have 3,000 people who are banging out the same prompts. But when you have guys like us who are like, I can turn all this stuff into a big idea, AI doesn't
Yeah.
have that brain. I don't think it ever will, with all the technology
Thankfully.
in the world. Yep.
Thankfully.
How do you
I
feel
hope it
about
never
that?
does. I hope it never does. I really hope it never gets that far because I've seen Terminator, man. I don't get people who have never seen Terminator. You think Skynet and all the other AI, like every single dystopian future with AI always goes through the same process. The moment the robots learn about emotions, the human race is fucked. That is literally just how it is. It's because like, oh, these guys are crazy. Let's just kill them all. Like every single time. Age of Ultron was the last one that they did that. But going back to something you said, and it's really powerful. So it's this because I get asked about AI a lot because I've worked in a lot of AI companies over the last since 2017. I've worked with a few 4 different AI companies in different markets, helping them develop the voice, go through different bits of consulting with them, helping out with different pieces. And here's what I can tell you. AI is nothing more than a power tool. It is a drill. Beforehand, the pencil was the screwdriver. What we were doing, we were typing up. We were just the handy people that had a screwdriver in our hand. The difference is we now have a power drill. If you're a smart copywriter, you can actually really use it to your advantage. And as Colin Terrio and I were speaking about this, the guy from the Cult of Copy, he said it's a lot easier to polish what is essential, what was it, to clean up a bad first draft than to write one from scratch. And I can tell you that because I've had it with one of the like campaigns. I can talk about this now because when this airs, it would have already, we've already seen how it would have gone. I wrote an email campaign for a fairly famously well-known international speaker and author. Um, and I couldn't just nail down my first idea with him. So I got AI to write, I wrote my prompt out. AI gave me four emails. I took two of them. I started to build a process, and before I knew it, I'd written all seven emails in a short space of time. And all I needed from the AI was the beginning template so I can edit it and see where it was going. So I already had the idea. I just needed something to visually execute the first draft, and it did. So this is what I'm getting at. So going back to something else that you said as well was employers and copywriters out there who are competing on price learn how to essentially market you. If you can understand what makes you different, your clients will see what makes you different, and thus you can charge more money. If you can't see that, you're forever going to be a commodity that can be outsold, outpriced, and undercut by your competition. And one other thing I'm just going to drop on this, copywriters, please try and remember one thing. Our world is freelance. Our world has never been corporate. Corporate is where copywriters go to die. Freelance is where we live. It's the truth.
It is. I mean, I like to stick. I mean, I think of the skills of A-list veteran or whatever, someone who's done at least 40, 50 million plus, a billion plus is that level of no matter what, I'm not too worried. Like Dan
Yeah.
Kennedy, like we talked about in the beginning of shoot, people aren't buying John Reyes's or Adil Amarsi's boxes of training. People don't want 20 DVDs and shipped to a box each month, but are our skills still relevant? Can we take that psychology and transfer it to something else? And the good thing is, the AI thing is still you can have 50 people on, teaching them how to use AI and give you 5, 10, 20, 30K to teach
Yeah.
them. But at the same time, it's like the veterans, you can teach, even if you're just starting as a copywriter or freelancer, master these kinds of skills, and you can take this artificial intelligence and put together a big idea that can beat out multiple controls, or you can just pound out AI stuff and rewrite all the words. And it's like, we can beat a control by just rewriting the headline and the lead. And
Oh,
that's, you can't have like AI do that for you if you don't have the psychological grasp of those skills. But that's
or the
just,
research. I mean, the one thing you
yeah.
can do for AI is like you can shortcut your research like nobody's business. But there's an element that you actually, when you're doing your own research, you memorize things that you wouldn't have memorized before if you just read them elsewhere. It's just going through the experience of it all.
But I wanted to touch on something was you've done something I haven't seen most. Um, Copywriters are marketers and vice versa. The best copywriters are also best marketers. But you've done something I haven't seen most writers do is you've actually done brain scans that measure
I don't think I've,
response,
dude, I
right?
don't think I've ever heard of anyone in our industry doing this.
Not to this extent, not to
Yeah.
the detailed extent you've done, because yours was specific to activate to really measure specific emotional responses, right? In copy
Yeah.
and all that thing. So
Yeah, like so for our fans at home who are listening, one of the things I did through the 2010s for it was like yeah, 2010s for about 8 to 10 years, give or take, was putting people in MRI machines and getting a neurologist to sit down with me and actually figure out what they were seeing on the replay because I would read copy to them. I'd have like we tried different control versions with different people that we wanted to sell to. I was lucky because being in London at the time and also being home where I am right now in Leicester, I had an extensive reach of friends that weirdly fit different personality types and groups really, really, really well. So I was like, hey, do you want to do me a favor? And they're like, what's that? I was like, just go get a brain scan with me, as we do just for the day, slip some money to the lab tech because we weren't supposed to do it. And thankfully, they don't work there anymore, so it's okay, I can talk about it. But the lab tech would basically get us to go, like, would put my friend through the MRI and sit down with a neurologist, would go through the copy, and we'd actually see where and what words were pinging off. Now, you couldn't just do that one time. You had to do it a multitude of times because you had to build enough evidence. Because again, I
right.
could say the word learn turned one person off, and the word learn turned on another person. You got to look at the personality types of who it is and what they're doing and what the mindset is and what type of person they were and all this, that, the other. But after a while, you essentially build together a portfolio of understanding of how people think. And I don't know when and how this happened to my brain, but as I kept picking these things up, they started to become embedded in my brain to the point that I can just look at people and be like, okay, cool. A little bit of a conversation. I know what would actually get them to buy. I know exactly what kind of thing that would motivate them to say yes and what they're afraid of. But yeah,
Yeah, it's
time.
it's actually really validating. I mean, those are things probably, I don't know how you feel about that, but these are things that you can actually talk about for days. These can
Oh
be
yeah,
not even
so
just from a
much.
copy perspective, but if you think about if you think about like an example of that, this is kind of scaling back to how,
Yeah,
direct response nerds like myself think is, if you remember back in the days where it was like hypnosis, people would sell hypnosis, NLP products to hypnotize yourself or to
yeah,
hypnotize your target audience through copy and all that stuff. But then there was the ones who blew it out of the water, and then
yeah,
they can create one sales letter that does hundreds of thousands of dollars. They just write it once because it actually did there were some that actually did the neuroscience research on why their hypnosis products work. Their self-hypnosis was, one of them I still remember. It was called 15-minute manifestation. I forgot who wrote it, but I was just, a few
mm,
years ago, I was such a huge nerd on that. And then it just, for years later, I was like, this sales letter keeps floating around. And I think it was on ClickBank back in the day. It was just really crushing it. And I was like, people keep buying this product like crazy. And it was less than 30 bucks. But the reason, it was just a self hypnosis product, wealth mindset, but it just
yeah,
crushed it. And the sales
yeah,
page, the VSL was amazing, but it's because it included the brain research. It was like, this is how our self hypnosis product works. And then it went through all the neuroscience research behind it. And it was just, that was the big idea. That was the selling point of, oh crap, this hypnosis product is the shit. I'm going to buy it. And it was just like
yep.
that for months and years, and people barely promoted it. But, this is probably something that should be more common knowledge. It's the same goes with the science of your brain scanning, right? Because ultimately, it's the same concept. I mean, conversions can tell the results behind our theories and stuff when we create, but
Yeah.
using these things like brain scans, I mean, these are probably things that not necessarily just an idea, but these are things that you guys
Oh,
like
dude.
you and I and the other, the other, like Colin from the Cult of Copy, all these guys you mentioned, these are things we can look into and just talk
Oh, dude,
about
I have
for
a book
days
about
and
this.
days and days and just tie it into the truth about. I just think it's amazing. Like, we might be going off on a tangent, but like I
Oh,
mentioned,
we
there's
can
not
do.
many writers like you who looked into these kinds of things.
Look, there's so many things around psychology that so many copywriters don't know shit about. Like, there's a few people I'll actually give their props to. Joe Vitale, Harlan Kilstein are both really good at NLP copy because of the way they do it. I've technically never used NLP intentionally in my copy, but I always look at there's a bunch of principles that we have that come from neurolinguistic programming, neuroassociative conditioning, CBT, so many different ways of therapy, and you can see how that works in the sales letter. This kind of boils down to the philosophy that was given very early on. Now, I always say there are two types of direct response copywriters. There's the Jay Abraham type and the Gary Halbert type. Dan Kennedy sits in the middle between the two, but if you had to go to the two extremes, your Gary Halberts were your foot soldier. They were the one that were actually down on the field. They were your commander in chief in field. They were the guy. They were your captain that were getting things done. They were the people who went ahead and executed everything. Then you had your Jay Abrahams, who kind of sat back at the command chief center, strategically laid down all the plans and told you where to go. And Dan Kennedy somewhere in the middle between there, like a field general that will do what they're doing. And the reason I bring this up is because what Gary Halbert did absolutely amazing was he was able to get into people's heads to actually create a quick line of profit. And he would do so by leveraging the pain points and the pleasure, but he wouldn't care about LTV. LTV was not his game. It never was. It was all that how do I get in quickly, how do I get what I need, and how do I get out? That's just the way a lot of the promotions seem to go. Then you have someone else like Jay. Jay, who was all about creating pleasure for your clients. Because psychologically speaking, what are we more drawn to? Avoiding pain or going towards pleasure?
Avoiding pain, actually, which
You'd be surprised.
is it? I think there's,
It's a
I don't know.
50-50 split. It's a
Is it?
split, but you have to know how to do it. And this is what I was going to get at. And so, by the way, you're completely right. We will do everything we can to avoid pain unless the pleasure is absolutely greater. Like, we don't give a fuck about the pain at that point. And if you want a perfect example of this, think back to being a teenager and sneaking out to a house party that you wanted to go to. Really, you're going to avoid the pain is you get grounded and possibly an ass whooping. The pleasure is you get to go to the party.
I think it might be the niche, but that's true. That's like a something that fires it. That what's that? Fires it under. It just lights a fire under your ass kind of thing. That's kind of like we were
Exactly.
talking about AI. Like, do you want AI to take over, or do you want to
Yeah.
be the entrepreneur who's just like, I rely on AI, and then all of a sudden it's everyone else's, and we can spot the emojis or the people who just
Yeah.
freak out, or do you want to, take the reins? Like, just that's like going to the party when your parents told you
Right.
not to, right? But it's also like there's, for example, health. Health is, I think, alternative health is the exception where it is avoiding pain. No, actually,
Same
you're
with
right. No, it
business.
is
There's
50
several.
50.
So the way that you do it, and this is something called the salted caramel principle, and I came up with it a while ago, but it's essentially being able, and this is what I do when I teach copy to people, is you want to keep it real. You don't want to bullshit your audience, but at the same time, you don't want to kill them with pain. Do you know how many, like, you've read these sales letters where everything from the moment go is all about, does your life suck? Does your wife want to leave you? Are you terrible? Do you feel fat? Are you broke? Do you wonder why you're even alive? Just, even though they're not saying those exact things, it's kind of like coming to those levels of pain. I have a different theory and one that's worked really well, which is quite simply start with a little bit of pain, tiny amount. Like think of it as salt on top of caramel, makes it taste better. But you need to point it out to them there is pain and then use the rest of the copy to deliver a huge amount of pleasure that's waiting for them on the other side. Essentially, you're avoiding the pain by reading the thing right now and gaining the pleasure by taking action. This is also how you create a long-term customer create completion in your courses, is by essentially giving them all the reasons to why. Now, people are lazy, they will forget things and so on and so forth, which is why you can gamify situations. But coming back to what it is, if you look at all good sales letters, like really great ones, I'm not talking the 1 or 2% conversion rates, I'm talking like the ones that knock it out of the fucking ballpark. Every single one of them, nearly every single one of them, combines an element of existing pain, which is just pointing people out what's going on. It could be like if your body's feeling unhappy with yourself and you're not able to go to sleep at night, it might be time to look at what we're doing. We've created a brand new, we've looked at everything that was going on with insomnia and getting people out of the circadian rhythm, and we realized it was just simply two separate things. One was having too much caffeine, and two was having a full brain before so you'd go to bed. So here are the two things I'd get you to do. Stop drinking caffeine after 4 p.m. and brain dump before you go to sleep. Just do these two things, and I guarantee you tonight you'll feel a lot better. But if you want to go even further, this is what we've created, and you can actually start on the sales letter from that perspective. I'm a fan of creating an open loop, always have been. So I always like to do my copy as like headline, subheadline, open loop paragraph, and then an introduction because that open loop paragraph allows you to actually seed in enough pain and then have the promise of pleasure by reading the rest of the copy, which creates the open loop. You introduce yourself to kind of let them know why it's important that they know you, and then you go straight back into how this is pleasurable and helpful to them. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It's that promise of reward.
Yeah,
I think it's that the whole psychology behind that of where is that reward I'm looking for. I guess in a way it's triggering that dopamine
yeah.
mechanism. Not to go too far off tangent, but
Oh,
full
go for it, man.
transparency, I used to be a hardcore cigarette smoker. Quitting was probably one of the hardest and most rewarding things I've ever done, but it was all
Amazing.
day. Over
Yeah.
time, smoking a pack and a half a day was that same concept of I can't wait till I get my next cigarette. I can't wait till I get this next dopamine hit. Is that anticipation of promising that sensation, but ultimately it really did nothing from that perspective. It really cigarettes didn't really do much but provide a gap of
Yeah.
wanting that next cigarette and then the satisfaction of actually
Well,
smoking it and then triggering that dopamine mechanism, which is almost the same concept of promising a reward or promising that pleasure. And it's the same with sales letter. You promise that it's going hardcore, but that's kind of the concept of 20, 30, 40, 50-minute VSLs or long form sales pages too,
yeah.
was continuously promising that payoff. Not necessarily like a cigarette, but it was
A
creating that.
payoff.
Yep. And that's the
It,
same
it's
as you mentioned with the open loop concept as
oh,
well.
entirely. And a guy that does this really well is a guy called Chris Haddad that we all know. And
Yeah, he's amazing.
Chris does it. Chris does it with curiosity. The guy's really good at just driving curiosity. I had the pleasure of seeing him at VidTow 2022. We hung out. And I've known Chris for years, so it was really nice just to finally meet him in person.
Right.
And his presentation on curiosity was literally one of the things I was like, holy shit, you're actually so right, because people don't use curiosity enough in their copy. Because this is the thing I always tell people. There's a myriad of ways of writing copy. They're like movie scripts. You have different genres for different people that write different styles. You can't expect someone like I don't know, Tarantino. Okay, Tarantino is one of those weird ones that can actually move into a multitude of different markets and actually do really well, but that's because he loves movies and characters. If we look at someone like, say, an M. Night Shyamalan, any movie that he directs has to have a twist. It has to have a certain style that he writes in. The moment he walks out of that world, his films are terrible. Same with Sam Raimi, same with Steven Spielberg. The moment they leave the niche that they're in, they suck. And it's funny because Michael Bay, he found his niche. His niche was overhype, overblown, ridiculous camera shots, stupid car chases, and a plot that's nonstop action. He did that with Bad Boys 1 and 2, and then he did it with, of course, the Transformers series, and he just kept going sequel, 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 sequel. Fun
Yep.
fact about Michael Bay that no one really thinks about. Michael Bay was one of the best directors in his art class, his film school, by the way. His teacher said that his diversity and ability to film different types of levels of emotions set him apart from everyone else in his class. He chose a niche, and he just went for it. Going back to what you were saying, though, and thank you for letting me know about that, because I know I've got family and friends that have actually quit smoking. I know how difficult it is.
Yeah.
But anyone that's out there that's thinking about this, John doesn't know I'm doing this, but reach out to him if you have a stop smoking product and see if you can get his story to be sponsored into your copy. I guarantee it'll convert better than what you're possibly pushing, because he's actually got real pain and people can feel that. Also, fun fact, because this is something very few people know about, the dopamine from a cigarette actually comes from the cigarette paper in most cases, because it's sugar paper. That's why most people end
Is
up with
it?
emphysema. Yeah,
It's crazy. That's kind of like the mechanism behind what drives the dopamine hit. I mean, we're
yeah,
going deeper down the rabbit hole, but
100%.
it is how do you trigger? I mean, ultimately, great salesmen. I mean, of course, salesmen in print, marketers like copywriters are the greatest marketers. It is that triggering the mechanism of dopamine is what can some of the best, even best public speakers usually had copywriting background or had people write it for
Yeah,
them, but it's just continuously promising, more dopamine. And then it is creating that gap between, like you mentioned, it's 50-50, avoiding pain or going towards pleasure. And that push-pull dynamic, it's kind of really advanced persuasion triggers, but it is, I'm going to promise pleasure and then create pain and then pleasure. And that really triggers the dopamine, which is, now you're withdrawing it, now you're putting it back. And then that can be done through storytelling too, which is
yep.
kind of the concept of like open loops and the hero's journey. But going down that rabbit hole, like you mentioned about Michael Bay, there is no dopamine hit. Going back,
No,
tying that into the dopamine hit, because it's like, what's going to happen? And it's just, you see Bumblebee and the Camaro, you see Optimus Prime smashing people, and you see the Dino Boss, all sorts of crazy stuff. And there's really no anticipation of the next thing, but how cool the action is, which is actually, appealing to guys who love action and children. But in terms of the storyline, there was no friction between that. Where is that gap? Just going back to that open loop concept too, like you mentioned, where is that gap in the storyline of what the heck is going to happen next? And it's just, yeah, that's just very hardcore action path. I'm going deep down the concept of dopamine, but
no, I like it.
it
No,
is
dude, that's
amazing.
exactly what we do. We are
Yeah.
literally the ones that we're in charge of the dopamine drop if you know how to do it correctly. There was oh fuck, you just reminded me of something. If you study good copy, you will find where these triggers lie. And there was an old product on JV Zoo that just reminded me of, and I really wanted to bring it up because it's a really good example of this. It's called Video Maker FX or VX. I can't remember. It was a really long time ago. Um, the dude that wrote the sales letter was not a copywriter, but he broke JV Zoo. And the reason when they interviewed him to ask him how he did it, he said, I just read every great sales letter, took what was best about it, put it into my thing, and saw how our product could deliver on it, and then just basically wrote that. And it crushed. And it kind of comes back to this idea, and I remember reading the thing, it's all about dopamine spikes. It was all about, look, video is the future, it's what's coming, but video editing can be a real pain in the ass. Or imagine you had a piece of software that was sitting on your desktop that you can just upload your video to, have it run through everything, give you the big budget production, and then also publish it to the websites you need it to publish to, like YouTube. At the time, it's only just YouTube that was the biggest video site there was, YouTube and Vimeo. Get them out there and just see how they would work. Boom. That's it. That thing did over $1 million in like 3 days because it
That's
was insane, or
insane.
like a week, just because like it wasn't even expensive. It was less than $100. So like the volume of sales that came in, it smashed affiliate records and everything else. And that all came down to the idea of dopamine spikes because it was telling people exactly what they needed and then showing them the pain of doing it manually. And that was the beauty.
Going down that rabbit hole, it is human to modern day. It is creating that ADHD dynamic too, because
Yeah.
people are becoming manic depressive through things like social media because there's that
Yeah.
spike of, guys like us, do we want to teach content? Do we want to share stuff? Do we want to create a sale? But then there's people who are just, I got 500 likes. That was a huge dopamine hit. People love me. And then a few weeks later, it's like, I get 2 likes. What's wrong? And then actually can trigger an imbalance of, I got all this pleasure. People love me. They're commenting. Now they're either hating on me or they're not responding anymore. And then that can trigger, people go through social media detox for those
Yeah.
reasons, which is creating that it's crazy. There's some medications people take, bipolar and manic depressive, that are actually dopamine. They call them like dopamine antagonists, and they are meant to balance out the dopamine receptors in the brain. And not, people are born with these kinds of things, but there's things that can trigger them, which is things,
Massively.
social media. I mean, cigarettes and all that stuff. Smoking cigarettes people who are susceptible could end up like those on bipolar. Man, not to say it's funny at all, but and people who are obsessed with social media, but
It's
as
a
a
disease.
yeah, it can create that. I just think it's one of the most powerful, most double-edged chemicals in our brain. Um, yeah, I think I went too far off on a tangent,
No,
but
you did not. You did
from a
not. I
marketing
got you.
perspective,
Can,
yeah,
can I can I reel it back? Because I
yeah, of
had like
course.
something that you just okay, so where you went down, I love that. Basically what happens is most people today, if you look at what ADHD is, it's essentially um it's an overspiking of dopamine or a lack of like your dopamine receptor is so low that it needs more dopamine in order to feel anything. And some people are naturally born like that. Hello. Other people are not. And most people today actually don't have it naturally. What they have is an over addiction of dopamine from a young age. So the receptor's not able to actually build up, which is why the detoxes work. If you want to use this for your advertising, however, here's how you do it with your audience. It's really fun. Go through a series, but don't make them dependent. Really, because you can do this. I'd be very curious if anyone does this in the audience. Go controversial to the audience. Everyone wants to give everyone a dopamine spike. Try and take it away from them. But don't be a dick about it. But literally tell people, listen, after you finish reading my email today, go out. Go for a walk, 1 hour, no phone. Why? Because I guarantee you when you come back, you'll feel better. In fact, one of the things, and we are going on random tangents because, of course, we are, John. Just buckle in. This is where
It
we're
all
at.
ties in together to
It
marketing,
really
so it's
does. It really does somehow. But what I was gonna say, like the tangent I want to take us down towards was essentially around how people nowadays don't have enough time to think. And thinking is actually one of the hardest things to do because if you can do it, your dopamine resets, which is a big benefit. So does your serotonin, because it gives your brain time to actually reset and focus and cool down. But it allows you to think of things differently because you're not constantly in either the doing or the resting modes. You're in the thinking mode, which gives you more time to actually evaluate how your options move forward. And the same goes with your dopamine and your audience's dopamine, because they're happy when they see a result, but they're also really happy to hear from you if you actually add value. And by value, I mean you make them feel a different state of change. This could be humor. This could be making them smile. This could be giving them hope. This could be giving them some inspiration. Whatever you do to change someone's state of being for the positive rather than the negative is value to them. And that's the dopamine spike. And the more of those you actually build in, or the dopamine hits that you build into the emotional bank account, there's a connection to you, the higher chance you have to sell. See, told you I'll bring it all the way back in the end.
yeah. And just for anyone listening, it's not. people might go down this rabbit hole of, oh my God, admin or it just this is an extreme. These people are evil. They're playing with our heads. They're trying to manipulate people. But honestly, looking back through our parents and grandparents' generation, they've been going through the dopamine. Like I mentioned, the cigarettes, that was
Yeah,
probably one of the most powerful, and years beyond that, it was candy. Like
yeah.
candy is one of the most powerful dopamine hits you can get nowadays.
I
Um,
mean, I'm not. You might have copped to basically being a former smoker, but I'm still a candy fan, and man,
I
I
have
eat
a
candy
sweet
way too
tooth. I'm
much.
not gonna
Same
lie.
here.
Like
I have
I
a
get
sweet tooth.
sensitive to. I'm one of those guys who's like I hyper focus on things, and if I just if I hyper focus, I can go do hardcore. Getting older, I could go very intensely on MMA and spar with someone half my age and do really well, or I can just eat candy and just binge on sugar
Oh,
because
do
there's
you train?
leftover Halloween. What's that?
Do you train?
I used to, but then I get carried up. People would say I get carried away with little things, which is actually really good for marketing and copy because it actually transforms our
Yeah.
thinking. Like with AI, we can just go on this crazy rapid tangent, or we can transform like high level marketers and slow down our thinking by, like you mentioned earlier, the research and putting together big ideas and the open loop concept. Like I mentioned, this is stuff our grandparents have been going through dopamine, not just, of course,
Us.
advertising too back then, right? It's like even you
Yeah.
get shoe polish. I think back in our grandparents or whatever, they would get their shoes spit shined, and it is that my shoes are getting dirty. I can't wait till it's clean, and someone shines it off again, and then it's also that open loop concept in our copy or the sequences we create. I think the biggest thing is to continue to be at a high level or stay A list or whatever, is to
Yeah.
just be authentic with the payoff, because it's messed up if you I think that was the old
Yeah.
school concept of black hat marketing, where this is
Yep.
amazing, all these dopamine payoffs, and then you buy the penis pill ebook and you buy it and it's like this is crap. That back in the day, maybe that black hat concept in a way was
It still works.
essentially it is, but it's that it's you put this skill set in the right hands and it is up to us. But that's ultimately what, when you get at advanced level, what marketing, persuasion, and copywriting is. It's just that back and forth concept. And circling back to AI again too, it is like AI cannot create. You can't say, hey, AI create a sales letter intro modeling Gary Halbert and make sure it opens dopamine. It has 5 open loops that promise a payoff. And it's like AI is just like, I'm just going to spit
What the
out
hell?
generic content and then pass it on to a copy chief who knows what he's doing.
Yep. And again, going back to what you're saying with AI, that it's so true. And this is what John Carlton used to say many years ago, and it's still something that stuck with me. The same secrets of selling that you get today are the same ones that were around 2000 years ago, if not longer. All it is how do I get this into your hands that is beneficial to you? And again, one of my favorite pieces, if anyone that's listening to this, I'm struggling with writing sales copy. Do what Gary Halbert, John Carlton, Doberman Dan, and every single great copywriter, including the two that are on this podcast right now, will tell you. Just sell the damn thing. Because sometimes that's the only thing you do. The moment you start selling the damn thing, you don't need a story. You can just sell it and it's there, it's done. And sometimes that first draft of just selling the damn thing is enough of what you need to get through what you're doing.
It is. It is. And it's like if you want to apply greater concepts later, that's the whole thing of beating the control or being really competitive or having other people go in and it's just, let's see if I can beat this amazing sales letter that did hundreds of thousands or a couple mil. And then
Yeah.
it's just, can I rewrite it, add a story, add the scientific proof? And sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not, but
Yep.
it is that keen eye of experience that ultimately can determine what'll beat a control. It's can I, of course, there's still people. I'm one of those guys who'll just be like, you have a 6 year control that did really well for 3 years. I'm one of those guys who'll just be like, let me rewrite it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is determining, just for example, of experience, if it's a personality based guru, um, there's a law of attraction, there's the health experts, there's the Shark Tank guys, there's the fitness gurus who are dominating. For example, I would be able to see if people love the personality of the influencer, then I know I have to rewrite it on the
Yeah.
personality. You could talk about how amazing the product is, or you can just write in
The
that
personality.
person's voice and then tell a really cool story that talks about how I
How this
started. Yep.
Yeah. And
Or you can just
there
sell it
is
like what sells it, right? That's what it is. If it's a personality, we can just tell a cool story, or if we have to go into scientific evidence, then we
yeah.
do. But it comes down to the testing.
And this is
What do
where
you
you
think?
get to pick exactly what you work like. And I'm right there with you, man. And the way I would only put this is, how do I put this? It goes back to the concept I said earlier. Different copywriters like different directors for different movie markets. I suck at doing financial copy. I don't like doing it. It's way too time consuming, and my creative brain goes, I don't like all these numbers, man. What the fuck are you doing to me? But otherwise, there's other copywriters that I know that are absolutely killing it in that niche and in that market because their brains are more wired to it. So essentially, if you're out there thinking, how do I do this in 2025 onwards? Well, quite simply, find your market, people. Find your style to begin with, and then find your market. If your style is like me, I'm a story seller. I'm the guy that likes personal brand stuff through and through. Can I sell other styles? Of course I can, but do I want to? No, because I've spent enough time actually building out the stuff that I like to do. Just like I'm sure John has built out the stuff that he loves, and he knows what his is like. Okay, if I really need to write copy and I need to get it done in a week, I know what niche I'm writing for. I'm not going to go write for a new niche that I need to spend weeks researching. But yeah, there's just a whole bunch of really fun things in there.
Yeah, we can talk about that stuff for days, like I mentioned. I mean, the MRI, I think that's something a lot of seasoned copywriters we can just nerd out over that for years and just really blow it up into
Oh, dude,
amazing concepts we haven't even discovered yet is with
we need
the MRI scans, which is that's a
you
whole
and I just
different
need.
ball game in it.
I'll tell you what, you and I just need to hop on a call that isn't a podcast, and I'll just run you through the stuff. If we decide to record it and release it, we'll let you guys know. But I think John and I are just gonna have a private one-on-one about this at some point.
And yeah, I mean, just including the research in and of itself is fascinating because it is that kind of thing where it's science based. Anyway, I'm going off on a
Yeah,
so what are you up to nowadays? Are you launching your own products, Adele? Are you
yeah.
partnering? Are you focusing more so on coaching? All of the above?
All of the above, weirdly enough, and I've got a podcast coming out, a new one because I had my old one that I stopped recording in 2021, but the new one's coming out in 2025. I've been saying this for years, but I've honestly just had way too many things kick off, and now I'm like, I got this ready to go. And I hope you'll be one of my guests. I really hope that you will be because it'll be fun to have you on there. But as far as products, yeah, right now I'm actually sunsetting one of my programs, because it's info product only with no coaching. And we're relaunching it in 20, like we're relaunching it in 2025 again, time of recording this and time it comes out. It should be all up and running. It's a full-on 6-month hands-on training program with a 12-month support system on the back end. And then of course there's private mentoring, there's speaking, there's a whole bunch of other fun stuff I get to do over 2025, all while traveling. That's basically my plan for the next year.
You did have a you had a podcast that was not to go off like on that
No, go
podcasting,
for it.
but you did have so you stopped doing a podcast and then I think you mentioned you went into coaching for a little while, right? And then you're
Yeah.
also working with clients again. So you're kind of picking back up. Are you more so evolving or are you kind of because you've been doing this for a long time, so you pretty much know the ropes,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. Right now, I'm just kind of building up to what I want to do because the reality is, 2021, I lost my focus on everything because obviously life got in the way, a lot of death, a lot of everything else. Grief gets to you. And it took me about 3 years to actually recover from all of that. So this year has been kind of trying to get my feet back underneath me, build that confidence up that I used to have around writing ads. Because again, I got lucky because the copywriters I mentored. I got to see their copy, I got to tweak their copy, I got to correct their copy, and I got to see the results, which allowed my brain to go, hey, you can still do this, which was nice. We had some ups and downs in between over the last couple of years, but yeah, like I said, I'm not taking on too many clients. It's more consulting I like to do because one of the things we didn't get to do on the show today, and I hope we get to do at some point. One of my skills is being able to freestyle copy while I'm talking to people, just like have a whole sales letter just ready to go while we're speaking. So that's kind of the areas that I'm focusing on right now. It's just basically how do I help other businesses grow? Who can I partner up with that can take my courses and put it into their coaching programs, and we figure all those things out as well at the same time.
yeah, there's always room for great copy coaches. There's
Yeah.
I mean, I feel the same way too. There's times where I've trained in-house teams where I work with the executives of the company and they give me 5 sales letters and how to teach their in-house copywriters how to beat their control or rip things apart. And then it's, how do we let me chief things before you run them, which is part of the separation between when I teach private students or sell them products. But circling back, there always is room for greater coaches to keep up with serving the new wave of copywriters. Sometimes it is copywriters who actually just want to learn to enhance this skill because it's an employable job market related skill, or I want to write my own products, or I want to continue to freelance. And it is, I think there will always be to like, that's the beauty of it. I mean, Gary Halbert, not to like go, there's Robert Collier for I don't know how long, how many decades, was
Yep.
maybe approaching 100 decades or so since the first old school direct response copywriters started. And it's just something to admit that even if AI turns into the Terminator, then internet's shut down and robots take over and their marketing and humans are no longer needed, the concept of direct response copy and persuasion will always be there. We can go back to a
Yeah.
pen and paper, even if the city is blacked out of lights, and then just write really cool ads. We can find out
You,
how to get your lights back for free and just put ads all
dude,
over the neighborhood and we're back in business. But
you've
yeah, there'll always be
you've
room for
given me
coaches.
you've given me a great dystopian novel here. Like our hero is actually a direct response copywriter who like builds the resistance against the robots just by using his skills or their skills as a direct response copywriter to like recruit a whole following to rebel. There's so many things we can do. So many.
Yeah, and ultimately it's that dopamine hit too. So
Exactly. Going back to
um
it. It's always the dopamine.
but circling back to more so of your I guess, like, before we wrap up, do you have a favorite coaching story, whether it's a horror story or it's a really good
Oh
story,
man, I've
of
got
whether
so many.
or a consulting story, like if you can pick
There's still.
one just off the top of
Ooh.
your head, whether you're coaching a
Okay,
client
I'll tell you what.
or a
Let's go.
student.
Let's go coaching because there's way too many stories here, and I'm gonna give you guys one that really warmed my heart. So 2022, 2021, hold on. 2022, that was it. 2022. I was coaching in the CMMP with my business partner Shiv Shetty, and we had a student join us called Amanda. Now, Amanda at the time, she was working roughly around 40 to 60 hours a week, like a lot of work doing content. She was getting paid $2,500 a month as a copywriter. She wasn't a copywriter. She came through our program, went through all the training that we had in-house that, I developed and is inside my training. She got her chops up to like where she wanted. Inside 3 to 6, I think inside 6 months, she was at $14,000 a month in that time period. And in that time from 2022 till now, she's not own oh God, the wins that this woman has been incredible. She's been able to buy her own house, which has been incredible. She was able to afford therapy to overcome a really devastating bout of grief that she had. She was able to pay for one of her dog's surgery that was life-threatening surgery that she wouldn't have been able to do if she didn't have the skills and the money, because she didn't have the money. The dog got sick. She wrote an email to her client. Her client sent her the money immediately using her skills as a copywriter. She sold it. She got the money she needed and moved forward. And that is one of my favorite stories about that person. It's just how much she's transformed. She's working less hours as well. She's working around like 20 hours a week while still hitting around 14 to 18,000 a month, which is just incredible.
What about this is probably so much you can pick from, but if you think about even a copy project, we're not necessarily, maybe it's not necessarily the person, but a promo you either like transformed or redid, or
So
if you
many
could
of
pick
those.
maybe not just one, but like a
Okay, I'll give you a
favorite.
few.
Okay.
I'll give you a few. I'll give you a few. So one of my favorite ones was I wrote in 2011, 13 years ago. I wrote this ad for male suicide prevention in the UK. There was we had 100,000 person mailing list, but we had a 37% response rate to that mailing list of men reaching out to ask for help and be paired up and mentored and sold to. So that was one of my most proudest moments because it helped save a lot of men's lives, which is needed. The second one was a client of mine came to me. They were doing 10 million a year with a 1 million profitability. So they were actually losing 90% of their revenue to vendors, equipment, time. Just there was so much stuff that was going on. I came in, I looked at what they weren't doing because it was they were a company that built gyms. That's basically what they did. They just built gyms. We found a way to actually find a whitelist supplement that they also owned but had never sold to the people they had actually gotten the gym deals with. That plus apparel plus a few other things as well, we transformed them inside 6 months. Inside 6 months, their revenue went from 10 million to 15 million. Their profitability went from 1 million to 6 million. So they actually, all that 5 million extra they made on top was pure profit based on what they were already doing. So the manufacturing costs were already cut in to what was going on. So that was really, really cool in the way they did that. Smaller projects I really, really enjoyed doing was rewriting a friend's sales piece, and this is something I'll tell you guys that really, really works well. Don't use center text throughout all your sales letters. This isn't a 2005 design class anymore. You're not trying to impress your high school teacher. Please go left to right. Single sentence structure works well, unless it's for headlines and subheadlines. That's different. But we fixed just those two things, including changing the word learn to discover for her specific audience. Client of mine mailed out her list first before I had any edits to do with it. She made $10,000. Sorry, she made $45,000 with her program in 7 days. The program was called 10K in 10 days. We relaunched that same program 30 days later to the same list with only slight differences to what I told it to do. We did $450,000 to the same list. So we did 10 times the actual sales by making two or three little tweaks. So those were some of my favorite ones, really. Like just I got so many other ones, but those are the ones I really enjoy.
That's what it is. At the end of the day, is the things we do is ultimately the transformation, right? We're after that before and after, and it is, of course, copy and great marketing acumen is the vehicle that'll take us there, but it is the before and after that ultimately does that, and that's what makes a great coach, a great marketer, a great consultant, and a great copywriter as well. So, if you had advice for someone who's just starting out, who's in that early stage we mentioned of should I use AI? Can I still get paid really well? Do I have to compete on price? I guess circling back to the anti-poverty skill, what kind of advice would you give them? If let's say they just, let's say they don't even have the money to pay a coach yet or something, or they're working up to it. What kind of
Okay.
advice would
How
you,
much how much money do they have? Like how much money could
if
they
it,
comfortably afford to spend? Because this the answer varies massively
yeah,
different on this.
let's say they're, let's say they just, let's say they worked a, 70 to $90,000 job per year. They saved 30 grand. They just quit and they're now making 50,000 per year as a copywriter. And then they're at that phase of, you know,
Okay, so that's different then. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So that's
I was gonna
like
say that's a little bit further on
that's
advanced.
the
Okay,
that's
so
the that's the
that's
journey. Or they're on the track to make 50,000. Let's say like
okay.
they're on
Let's
track.
say
So
that's character one, and let's say they have I don't know $3,000 that they can spend. So character one has 3 grand in the bank to spend. Character two has 1,000. Character three has 100. Does that work? Can we
yeah.
go around
So
that?
let's say character one is, I'm interested. Let me talk to you about your 3K coaching before I sign up. And then there's someone who just bought the front end program who's DIY, who's like, is this worth it? Where's that gap, or what would you kind of tell them, or
Okay,
advice
so
would you?
let's take it back even before they've ever bought anything or even having that conversation. I mean, the advice I'd give them would be very, very different. So if someone's starting out very early on, they only have $100, I always look at what type of level of skill they have. If it's only $100 and they have zero copywriting skills whatsoever, I always try and get them to buy John Collinson's Kick-Ass Secrets of a Marketing Rebel because it's between 20 and $50. It's really cheap, and it's easily one of the best copywriting books you'll ever pick up. Um, so and courses out there that there is. It's old, but it's enough to get your skills up. Once they've actually got through that and they still have $50 left, then they can start go hunting for clients while putting in the time and practice. Now, what you'll notice is no matter what level you're at, the key term here is practice. You have to be able to put the work in. Don't just do the copy when you're getting paid for it. Write the copy when you're bored shitless, when you're on a school bus, when you're walking around, when you're sitting there and thinking about jerking off for the day. Go ahead and write some goddamn copy instead because it will be far more rewarding for you. It's another thing to actually get done. If you're at $1,000 and you haven't become one of my students, go pick up my actual. We're sunsetting the program, the encyclopedia, but go pick that up because I'll tell you how to write welcome sequences, sales letters, upsells, downsells, opt-ins, and thank you pages. That'll literally give you everything you need on end-to-end funnel. Go sell that. That's all I tell you. Go to people and say, listen, for $1,000, I'll write your welcome sequence for you. Great. For $5,000, I'll take care of everything for you. You've already made 5x your actual ROI, but more importantly, you know what you're doing, you're cutting your teeth. The reality at that point is for the first two people, it's not so much putting money in the bank, it's getting the hours and skills in to see whether or not you can actually do this. Get the time of what's in there. If you're at 3K and you have that amount in there, you work towards a 50K a year copywriting fee that you're actually doing. You've done this a little bit, maybe you're 6 months in, maybe you're a year in, you've got some good clients coming in towards you. How do you take that to the next level? Well, really simply, if you are unable to afford a coach, look for a group coaching program that allows you to get close to the coach, if that's one way of doing it. If you don't want to go down the coaching route and you can't do one-on-ones for whatever reason, actually, to be fair, the reality is most copywriters and most coaches I know, they do have a one-off fee that they will actually happily charge you to get some of their time. Some people it's less, like 200, $300. Other people it's 2 to 3,000. Some people it's 5,000. Some people it's 10,000. But essentially, find the person that you want to have at the level that you're at, speak to them and see what their actual price point is, and work around it. Most cases, you can actually get them for around $1,000 for the hour. Spend the grand because that $1,000 for that 1 hour, that will give you more information and understand that you can ever look at because it's there. If you have 3,000, spend 1,000 on coaching, one-on-one. Spend the other two in this manner only. Get that copywriter or a copywriter you respect to break down your copy for you, to literally give you a full review of how good you are and what you're doing. Let them go through a sales letter, tell you how to tweak it, what different things you can do, and get them to record it and break it down with you. Because this is one of the things I do with all my mentees, is I show them the suggestions I make in their copy. I go on Zoom with them. I walk them through why I made the changes to the point that they're able to hear my voice in their head when they're writing copy and making the edits, because that's what you want. If you spend your money in that way, you will see how your money can skyrocket, but also how your skill level skyrockets. These two ways move you forward. If you're afraid of AI, don't be, because the AI boom and bubble is going to come to a collapse. Not collapse, but it's going to be seen for what it is. It's only advantageous to a very certain level. It doesn't get you up above. Once you have your skills that go up above, then you can actually charge more, use AI as you wish, and actually have it do whatever you want it to do. But for me, I'm actually more of the team where can I get the AI to actually take care of doing my laundry and doing all the stuff I don't want to do so I can actually spend all my time fucking around and drawing and writing and stuff because that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I think it's a dependence or reliance on it because then it can reduce your
Yeah.
confidence if that's taken away. But
Yeah.
I guess one final thing I want to touch on. I mean, I have my own processes too, but it really does depend on the needs and the niche. But even if you're not doing it anymore, let's say you had a consulting client or a client who needs copy who came to you. I think we all have, the processes are different. I have my own. It also depends on the niche.
Yeah.
But let's say they have um, 3 grand to 8 grand to part with. They're not sure about commissions or royalties, and they have a bunch of notes and a half-written sales letter, and then they're thinking about should I create a funnel, and they don't know about pricing, and they don't know about their upsells, those kinds of things. What's the I guess the starting point? Where would you
Hire, hi,
start to have them? What would you tell them
oh,
at?
okay. So they've hired me for around 8K and I get to spend that how I will. Okay, cool. What I would do is I'd actually put one of my junior writers to work on their copy for them to help them finish off their draft. But what I would do first is I would get them on the phone for about an hour, hour and a half. And I would actually talk to them through, I wouldn't even look at any of their content. Maybe I will prior, but the reality is actually more towards uh looking at who they are. What is their core story? Why do they do what they do? What is the beneficial belief around this? What do they really want to do? And if the client comes at me that all they want to do is make as much money as possible and they don't really care about the ethical standpoints of what they're doing, then I don't want to work with them. But let's say they actually pass all that stuff and we have a chat. They've already paid me at this point. We would go through the entire process of why they are who they are, what got them there, what kicked their ass to get them to where they are at the point, what other experiences are around them. And I asked really odd questions like, what are your favorite desserts? What are your favorite ice creams? What movie impacted you the most? Who's your favorite author, who's your favorite actor, who's your favorite musician right now, what song are you listening to on repeat? All these different things are just elements for me to understand their personality, because if I can understand their personality, I can understand them, I can talk like them, and I can pass that same information on to my team. And again, I've managed to do this because like I've done it for so long that I'm able to actually encapsulate those moments. But if you're new, try and start doing that. Like I would just look, if this is a client, I'd actually get them to sit down with me, go through those processes, figure it out. Because it's also me, I'd probably verbalize the rest of their sales letter while I'm on the call with them and go, does that sound like I'm going in the right direction? Like, yeah, I'm like superb. I'll send that recording to my junior. She would basically go ahead and write everything out, send me the final draft, and I'd basically go through it in moments and give it back to my client. Now, if they don't have a funnel, I'd look at what else they have in their offering, setup, and selection that we can actually get going and working through. A really easy example on this, and John, you know, like how some people have drip feed content where they're like, oh yeah, we'll just drip feed the content because the only way to go through it.
Right.
Here's a really easy upsell for every single one of you guys. It's an offer bump on the cart. Just figure out what 20% of whatever you're selling is, as long as it's not low ticket or something like that. Like mid ticket's fine. Like 20% of it, and just basically stick it onto the offer bump by saying this is it. Like on the sales copy, tell them it's drip feed. On the offer bump, tell them they can get access to literally everything today for an additional fee. Because there are some people who literally want to run through things quickly, and there are other people out there who just want to take their time and actually like the slow released content side of things. So you're giving them both options. But I'd look at the client in its entire on their entirety and go, okay, why do you not have a funnel? What is it here that you're trying to upsell? What's the end point? It can't just be the front end. We have to have something on the back. So that's how I do
Nice.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope.
That's a really, that's a really strong starting point. It is kind of where the foundation of a good project usually kicks off. Of course it is the how do we monetize. The back end is sometimes what people overlook. Sometimes
Yeah,
the product or the pricing they have in place is completely off.
yeah.
Sometimes they're missing out on opportunities. So people would say raise the price or something, but it's not always true. If it is a supplement, for example, it is just offer, why don't you have a rebill? Why don't you offer them 3 buying options instead of 1? Why don't
Yep.
you, are doing direct mail? Why doesn't this go online? Why doesn't this have a follow-up sequence? And then it becomes test to
Oh,
cold traffic. So it always is, but like you mentioned, that thoroughness of the initial
cool.
connection and then the niche is really what can drive a campaign. It also is, of course, the follow-up and how does it ultimately
Massively.
perform. Yep.
You can have the best product for the wrong audience, and something you said I really want to jump on because so few people do it. Hardly anyone I know does stick letters anymore. And like, are you kidding me? A good stick letter. And again, a question you asked me earlier, what's happened with my clients in the past? We had an ecom client who was each product order value was $50, is how much they were doing, and they were mailing it out and all that the other. And it was to women in their third trimester, but they could market to women in their first trimester as well. I just told them put together like a quick little stick letter that makes an offering for your product and supplement for the husband and for the child, and just see what happens. And they're like, oh, you don't. I was like, look, you've already spent the marketing dollars. Just see if you can get them to spend another like 50 to $100, even 70. Just see what happens. They made a lot more money. They actually made a lot more money just by making that offer because people didn't realize I can give this to my kids. I can give this to my husband. Oh my God, it's safe. Yay. Now you've actually tripled
Right.
it. And again, this is a part that no one actually looks at. But John, thanks so much for having me, man.
Yeah. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for people to find you, follow you?
Oh, cool. So if you guys head on over to either my LinkedIn or my Instagram, it's just my name, Adil Amarsi. You'll find me literally everywhere. There's only one of me. If you follow me and DM me on Instagram, you will get a response. If you send me a message on LinkedIn, you'll get a response. If you add me on Facebook, I don't know how many friends I have, so sometimes I won't be able to accept you. But trust me, if you want a response from me, just message me on Instagram. Be like, hey, and you'll probably get a response from me.
Cool. Thanks again for joining us. We enjoyed having you sit there right next to us in your virtual seat, and I hope the feeling was mutual. Don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to the Authority Marketing Podcast. And if you'd like, check out some other episodes we've got. Stay tuned for our next one.